In a world where water is the very foundation of life, where rivers carve the earth, where oceans breathe storms into existence, and where every living cell depends on the quiet pulse of H2O to survive, there exists a paradox so strange that it borders on the incomprehensible. To most of us, water is comfort. It is a glass of cool refreshment on a hot day, a healing rainfall that washes away dust and heat, the element that surrounds us when we bathe, swim, or simply stand under a shower in the morning to awaken. Yet for a few among us, water is not a cradle of life but an enemy that lurks silently in every drop, every cloud of humidity, every tear that might unexpectedly roll down the face. Imagine living in a reality where the touch of water does not soothe but wounds, where the very substance that nurtures life becomes, with cruel irony, the trigger of pain. This is not a metaphor, it is a rare medical condition called aquagenic urticaria. To those who live with it, each encounter with water, whether from rain, sweat, or even their own tears, can bring swelling, hives, itching, and burning sensations that make existence a daily battle. And that is where our story begins, with the mystery of how water, the lifeblood of the planet, can transform into what feels like poison. To grasp the magnitude of this enigma, pause for a moment and imagine what it would mean to be at war with something as omnipresent as water. Imagine never being able to swim carefree in the ocean, or take shelter beneath a sudden rainfall, or indulge in the simple pleasure of a long, warm bath. Imagine fearing the invisible humidity in the air on a hot summer's day, because that moisture alone might prick the skin with burning hives. Imagine your own sweat turning against you, punishing you for the act of exertion, for something as small as walking across a street or climbing a set of stairs. Even tears do not bring comfort, because the salt water that we associate with grief and healing becomes another sharp reminder of isolation. These are not the imaginings of some surreal nightmare but lived realities for the individuals diagnosed with aquagenic urticaria, people who live in constant negotiation with a world soaked in water, a world that for them is dangerous in ways most of us will never have to fathom. It is perhaps human nature to label water as friend rather than foe. Throughout history, civilizations have risen on riverbanks and crumbled in drought. Literature and art have celebrated water as purity and rebirth. Our bodies, composed of more than 50% water, testify with every heartbeat to the essential truth that without water, there can be no life. So when we first encounter the idea that water can burn, not metaphorically but literally, the mind recoils. The concept stands at the threshold of the believable, blending the familiar and the alien. It feels paradoxical, even impossible, and that impossibility is part of what makes this condition so haunting to explore. It challenges our assumptions in the most intimate way, turning the routine act of touching, bathing, or crying into a hazardous encounter. What is most captivating about this topic, and perhaps most unsettling, is that the world remains drenched in water no matter how one tries to escape. This is not like a food intolerance where specific items can be avoided with care. This is not equivalent to an allergy to pollen where certain seasons bring crises but relief eventually returns with time. Water is not a substance you can escape, nor a season that you can simply outwait. Its presence is permanent, relentless, omnipresent. To turn away from it is to turn away from life itself. And yet, the human spirit has a strange capacity to adapt. Those who carry this rare affliction learn strategies, develop rituals, and reshape their relationship with the very fabric of the world to survive. That survival, one might argue, is as mysterious and inspiring as the condition itself. Even in scientific terms, Aquagenic urticaria resists simple explanation. To say that water is harmful seems absurd, since we know the human body is made of water, thrives on water, depends on water for every physiological process. When scientists examine the immune systems of patients, what they find is not a uniform answer but a series of complex puzzles. Some theories suggest that it is not water itself but substances dissolved in it that create reactions. Others suspect a breakdown in the skin barrier that allows for heightened sensitivity. Regardless of conjecture, one element remains certain: for those who suffer, the pain is real, immediate, and deeply felt. The scientific questions only deepen the wonder, giving us a glimpse into how fragile and mysterious the human body can be when set against forces we thought we understood. For the listener trying to fall asleep, let your mind drift with this thought. While you rest, you are surrounded by the unceasing presence of water. Perhaps a glass sits on the nightstand beside you. Perhaps rain once fell earlier in the evening, leaving the air cooler, richer in scent. Perhaps beyond the window lies the movement of rivers or lakes, silent in the night. Water soothes us most of the time, cools us, revitalizes us, and yet somewhere in the world there are those who lie in darkness fearing its touch. This duality, this strange divide between necessity and danger, between gift and poison, invites us to reflect on our own fragile balance with the natural elements. And in reflecting on it, a story opens a story that is not merely about medical anomalies but about resilience in the face of the unimaginable. That is the power of this subject. It does not merely astonish us with rarity, but it compels us to think about how we would live if such a rule governed our existence. Could we cope? Could we adapt? Could we find ways to continue living in a world that seems to turn the basic conditions of survival into potential threats? By asking these questions, we begin to sense the profound gravity of the condition and the equally profound strength of those who live with it. The paradox of aquagenic urticaria sits at the heart of human experience. Life depends on a substance that can also inflict pain. This mystery serves as both a scientific puzzle and a philosophical mirror. It asks us to reconsider the assumptions we carry about what is safe, about what is natural, and about what it means to endure. Tonight, as we sink into calmness, let us explore that mystery patiently, gently, as one would float upon water in a dream, knowing that for some, each drop that touches the skin is a reminder of struggle, but also a reminder of the extraordinary capacity of human beings to survive even when survival itself seems impossible. When we first hear the words aquagenic urticaria, it feels like a distant scientific phrase, something abstract, clinical, detached from our daily lives, yet hidden within those words is a profound fracture in our understanding of what the human body can and cannot endure. To know that water, this constant, this companion, this intimate thread woven into every moment of existence, can provoke the skin to revolt, feels like standing at the edge of an abyss where the rules of nature dissolve. The essence of this condition lies not in poetry but in physical reaction, in histamine floods, in welts rising across the skin within minutes of water brushing against it. Yet to describe it merely in biological terms risks diminishing the enormity of what it means to live with it. To step closer into this paradox, we must allow ourselves to weave together science and imagination, fact and empathy, so that the picture becomes vivid, both to the rational eye and to the quiet, sleeping mind listening in the darkness. It begins with the skin, our first defender, our delicate barrier between self and world. The skin is not merely a surface, it is an organ that breathes, senses, regulates, shields. On average, it accounts for nearly 2 square meters of surface area, an expansive living frontier where environment meets body. Within this barrier there are nerves, mast cells, proteins, and lipids, all working to keep invaders out while letting essential elements in. For most of us, contact with water is a neutral affair, occasionally invigorating, occasionally soothing. Yet for those with aquagenic urticaria, something in that symphony of barrier and interaction goes wrong. Histamine is released. Vessels dilate. Redness and swelling appear as though the body has sounded an alarm, misidentifying the most vital liquid as something to ward off. It is as if the immune system flickers into confusion, mistaking nourishment for attack. Medical literature struggles to pin down a singular cause. Some researchers believe the condition might not be caused by water itself but by reactions to substances dissolved in water, even pure distilled forms. Others propose that water interacts with the sebum or proteins already present in human skin, forming toxic byproducts that stimulate immune reactions. It might even be that certain structural differences in the epidermis allow water to destabilize mast cells directly. Whatever the mechanism, the certainty is that the body perceives water not as ally but as adversary. And those caught in this fragile imbalance live in a state of constant vigilance, measuring every potential contact, every interaction with the element that most of us trust unthinkingly. To imagine this more deeply, think of the simplest daily routines we carry out without thought. A shower that splashes across the body, washing away the fatigue of the day. A splash of rain that dots the hair and cheeks, leaving cool traces of nature's rhythm. To someone with aquagenic urticaria, each of these moments is not refreshment but confrontation. The droplets trigger a prickle, then a flare, and very often a cascade of burning pain. Even wiping it away does not reverse the process instantly, for the skin has already entered its cascade of reaction. Imagine then the constant fear, the preparation, the anxiety wrapped around something so ordinary as washing one's hands or stepping into drizzle on the way to work. Those who live with this condition often practice meticulous adaptation. Baths or showers, if attempted at all, must be brief, carefully timed, often protected by creams, medications, or barriers that reduce the severity of reaction. When heat rises and sweat beads, clothing is layered and cooling strategies employed to suppress the body's natural perspiration. Tears are sometimes fought against not merely for emotional strength but because they sting in ways most of us cannot imagine. So much of life as others know it, running to catch a bus, exercising, even laughing until moisture fills the eyes, becomes calculated risk. Each action holds a shadow, each comfort reshaped into threat. And yet, life continues, because resilience, even in the face of cruelty, is something humans weave into their being over time. From a scientific perspective, the condition is classified as extremely rare, fewer than 100 documented cases, scattered throughout the world. This rarity makes it harder to study in depth, for there is no large pool of patients for careful, staged experiments. Medicine thrives on patterns, probabilities, shared data that can be built into evidence-based strategies. With aquagenic urticaria, the fragments of information come only in individual accounts, case by case, each with variations that resist easy categorization. One patient may react only after prolonged exposure. Another may find even a few seconds sufficient for hives to erupt. Some report itching and burning, others describe deeper stings of pain, while a few speak of fatigue, headaches, or nausea following flare-ups. It is like piecing together a fragmented puzzle without knowing what the final image should look like. Still, every fragment matters, and over years, physicians begin to notice shared threads that weave into what we recognize today. Listening closely, the science hums more softly in the background, a rhythm of possibilities rather than conclusions. Perhaps the skin contains unidentified components that, when mixed with water, create irritants akin to allergens. Perhaps there is a subtle structural anomaly in carrier proteins that misinterpret hydration as damage. Perhaps genetic factors lie dormant until triggered, waiting for the right coincidence of circumstance. Each theory offers a tentative light on an otherwise shadowed pathway. Yet in the meantime, for those who suffer, there is no retreat into theoretical patience. There is only life, and life demands ritual, careful attention, steady resilience. Consider now the social dimension, the ripple beyond the skin. Friends might not understand why one avoids rain, or why swimming is impossible, or why exercise is carefully rationed. Strangers might misinterpret avoidance as aloofness, as reluctance, as fragility. Family members might struggle to balance empathy with practicality, especially in households where water is omnipresent not just in hygiene but in meals, cleaning, and shared experience. The individual may feel isolated as much by misunderstanding as by the symptoms themselves. Humans are social beings, and sometimes the greatest burden is not the reaction itself but the distance it creates between oneself and the rest of society. In this way, aquagenic urticaria is more than a medical disorder. It is a lived paradox that intersects with identity, culture, emotion, and community. The medical texts describe hives, welts, pruritus. But in lived language, it is described as fear, frustration, embarrassment, even grief. It is a reminder that science and life do not always speak the same language, and that to truly understand such a condition, we must let both vocabularies stretch and overlap. For the scientist, aquagenic urticaria is a puzzle. For the patient, it is an intimate antagonist. For the listener, it becomes a lens through which to ponder what it would mean if something essential betrayed you. The body of medical research reflects the evolving struggle to grasp the mechanics of this phenomenon. Early reports emerged in the late 20th century, often dismissed or doubted due to rarity. Over time, growing case studies lent credibility. Treatments have been attempted: antihistamines to quiet the immune system's hyperactivity, phototherapy to alter skin responsiveness, even barrier creams that act as shields against droplets. Relief can be partial, sometimes significant, sometimes meager. But a cure remains elusive. Each breakthrough scratches at the surface without yet revealing the heart of the mystery. What fascinates observers, and what draws storytellers into this theme, is the way this condition sits at the border between the possible and the absurd. To have sunlight cause pain makes sense in the logic of sunburn. To have pollen create sneezing has been accepted as allergy long before modern science. But to have water, the universal solvent, the nurturer of forests and bloodstreams, ignite hives on contact, unsettles us at a primal level. Water is not just chemical, it is symbolic, mythic, deeply woven into the psyche. It purifies, baptizes, cleanses, renews. That it could be toxic fractures countless cultural associations, leaving us grasping for new ways to think and speak about its meaning. As the hours drift forward into night, as you rest and listen, consider how such contradictions invite wonder, not despair. Humanity's story has always been one of adaptation to adversities once thought insurmountable. Those with aquagenic urticaria, though few, embody this spirit in striking form. They remind us that life is not a binary of possible or impossible, safe or dangerous. It is a spectrum of accommodations, redesigns, and inventions crafted in response to circumstances none of us predicted. In the glow of science we may search for molecules, pathways, enzymes misfiring. But in the soft hush of reflection, we see beyond science into the lived courage of those who wake each day knowing water surrounds them, and yet they step forward carefully, thoughtfully, persistently. That forward motion is itself a triumph. Their lives reveal something vital not only about pathology but about the very capacity of humans to find new definitions of normal. There is an odd beauty, too, in the mystery that persists. Because as long as the condition remains unsolved, it continues to stir imagination, to provoke curiosity, to enhance humility before nature's complexity. It invites the scientist to look closer, the philosopher to consider necessity and danger woven into one, and the listener to marvel at the strangeness of existence. It allows us to drift into contemplation, to value the health we take for granted, to carry in mind the truth that what is ordinary to some may be extraordinary to others. Even if tonight you drift into dreams, carrying with you the sound of words stretched across this paradox, let part of you linger on the thought, the world is not as simple as we imagine. It is filled with riddles, hidden strangeness, conditions that remind us how fragile and unique each human body truly is. And in that fragile uniqueness lies the unfolding story of aquagenic urticaria, the rare instance where H2O, the water within our cells and between mountains, becomes not solace but source of struggle. And yet, the struggle itself bears its own quiet kind of resilience, a whispering reminder that no matter how strange the circumstances, people continue, adapting to each drop of the ordinary world turned extraordinary. There is a point in every great mystery when facts recede, and what remains is the deeply personal, the human echo that gives voice and form to something otherwise abstract. Aquagenic urticaria may be described by physicians in terms of histamine, welts, and erythema, but those words, though clinical and necessary, barely scratch the surface of what it truly feels like to live each day in fear of water. To bring the condition closer into view, into understanding, we must step into a story, the story of a life shaped and reshaped around a paradox, a life where every drop of moisture carries weight, and where survival is not only scientific but emotional, psychological, and profoundly human. This is a story reflected in countless testimonies, not of famous figures but of ordinary individuals who endure the extraordinary, who build intricate patterns of resilience around every fragile encounter with the element that the rest of us swim in without hesitation. Imagine waking in the morning to the simple routine most of us take for granted. Your body yearns for refreshment, a splash of water to wash the sleep from your eyes, a shower to rinse away the night. Yet for one living with this condition, that very thought becomes an obstacle course. The act of bathing is no longer a matter of comfort but of survival strategy. Baths are timed with precision, with only brief moments under carefully regulated water, followed by the immediate application of protective creams or medication to calm the itching and prevent the hives from spreading. And even with those precautions, there is no guarantee that the reaction will be manageable. For some, those welts rise quickly, red and angry, like a warning flaring across the skin. The itch and burn can last long after the water has gone, long after the towel has dried away the droplets. If one avoids the bath altogether, new problems begin, the difficulty of feeling clean, the uneasy sense of being separated from the normal rhythm of hygiene that society demands. It is not simply about cleanliness but about dignity, about the quiet yearning to feel at ease in one's own body. The day stretches forward. Outside, the weather has no sympathy. Rain may fall without warning, carried by winds across roads, sidewalks, and rooftops, landing on everyone indiscriminately. Yet while others might smile at the refreshing splash of droplets or carry only mild annoyance when wet clothes cling against skin, for the person with aquagenic urticaria, storms are hostile, merciless guests. A few seconds of rain striking the face can lead to hives blooming in patterns across cheeks and forehead. Umbrellas become shields, jackets become armor, and each step outside is calculated according to forecasts, cloud formations, and the subtle change of scent in the air that signals precipitation. An entire day's plan can collapse under the sudden arrival of a storm, and retreat indoors is not a choice but a necessity. This is not trivial avoidance, it is a battle line drawn against something as trivial to others as raindrops scattered by the breeze. Even staying within the safety of home presents trials. The body itself becomes an adversary because sweat is still water. A hot room, overexertion, a moment of emotional stress that causes perspiration, all these can trigger the condition from within. It is not enough to avoid rivers or showers, not enough to dodge rainfall. The skin reacts even to the moisture secreted naturally, involuntarily. That awareness breeds an almost relentless vigilance, a careful tempering of activity. Exercise, though necessary for health, must be performed strategically, cooled swiftly, moderated well below the breaking point of perspiration. Even ordinary tasks like cooking in a warm kitchen, lifting groceries, or moving quickly through the day must be curtailed in ways that outsiders rarely perceive. The weight of adaptation is invisible to the observer, but heavy in the life of the one bearing it. And then there are tears. We think of tears as intimate, as expressions of grief, of joy, of release. To many, crying is not only cathartic but intertwined with our basic humanity. Yet for those with aquagenic urticaria, tears are barbed daggers. When they slip free, they sting the skin beneath the eyes, leaving heat and hives, carving trails not only of sorrow but also of pain. Imagine the quiet cruelty of being afraid to cry freely in moments of grief, having to fight not just against sorrow itself but against the physical punishment that follows it. Joy, too, can summon tears, but laughter that dissolves into crying bears the same consequence. The body betrays itself at the very point it tries to express deepest feeling. In this rhythm of living, there grows a profound psychological dimension. Fear is not occasional but continual, whispering at the edge of every experience. Imagine the constant awareness of moisture, the glass of water in a friend's hand, the condensation on windows, a damp towel left carelessly on a chair, the gathering clouds in the distance. These are not neutral anymore, not background scenery, but cues for vigilance, cues for self-protection. Fear seeps into memory itself, until each potential encounter recalls a previous pain. Each droplet carries the echo of a welt that once flared on the skin. Over weeks and months, this burden accumulates. Stress becomes partner to the condition, amplifying every flare-up and feeding a cycle of vigilance. And yet, the courage to continue is ever present, because life permits no pause, no suspension of responsibility. One must carry forward despite the uncertainty. Socially, the impact is subtle but deeply felt. Friends may not understand why one avoids swimming pools or declines an invitation to the beach. They may laugh lightly at the use of long-sleeved jackets in summer or wonder impatiently why rain brings such urgency. The invisibility of the disorder is almost cruel in its nature, because on the surface, once dry, the skin may look ordinary again. The pain is present in moments, but once subsided, the evidence fades. Outsiders cannot see the lingering fatigue or the emotional strain it leaves behind. As a result, patients often face not only the struggle of physical reaction but the added weight of skepticism, the delicate exhaustion of explaining themselves again and again, of translating the invisible into convincing language. Yet within this narrow margin of challenge, resilience flourishes. Those who endure adapt their homes, their wardrobes, their schedules. Showers are timed to specific hours when flare-ups are less likely to disturb important obligations. Clothing is selected not only for style but for efficiency at protecting skin from sweat, from humidity, from sudden splashes. Windows are kept sealed during storms, fans circulate air to keep humidity low, and travel decisions are weighed against forecasts with precision. Life becomes an intricate dance between avoidance and necessity, between precaution and the simple desire to live freely. What might sound like restriction from the outside emerges, in time, as structure from within. And perhaps the most moving thing of all is that through all of this, there is laughter. There are families sharing meals, there are friendships maintained through understanding, there are moments in which life continues with beauty despite the relentless edge of danger. Aquagenic urticaria does not strip humanity away from those who live with it. It challenges them to redefine every ordinary action in ways that most of us will never have to imagine. And in that, there is a quiet bravery, a steady insistence that even if water carries pain, life itself still carries meaning. As time passes, patterns of coping become deeper. New methods are tried. Some rely on antihistamines daily, others find comfort in barrier creams or phototherapy. Doctors and patients experiment together, weaving fragments of science into personalized strategies. No silver bullet exists, but relationships of trust form between patient and medical guide. Sometimes the search for answers becomes almost as important as the answers themselves, reminding both sides that medicine is not only about cure but about companionship in the face of the unsolvable. The story is lived not on the pages of journals but in the rhythm of mornings and nights, in the small triumphs of days without flare-ups, in the relief of making it home dry before a rainfall. In reflecting on one life, we begin to grasp the magnitude of this condition across all who endure it. Each person's account may differ in detail. One reacts only to long exposures, another cannot touch water for even brief seconds, but every account resonates with the same themes: vigilance, adaptation, fear, resilience. And in hearing these themes woven again and again, we begin to sense the scale, not by counting numbers but by listening to voices. The medical puzzle becomes human, and the human becomes unforgettable. When you rest tonight, let your thoughts wander into that paradox. Imagine yourself there, navigating a world where a glass of water is not a symbol of clarity but of risk, where laughter that leads to tears is tinged with hesitation, where a warm shower is less a comfort and more a gauntlet. Imagine that, and then return to your own body, grateful for its freedoms, aware of its fragile balance. In that awareness is the bridge between empathy and understanding, between distance and closeness. The story continues, unbroken, flowing onward like a stream of paradox itself, water, ever present, ever needed, yet for some, ever dangerous. And through it all, beyond the suffering, the adjustments, the bewilderment of science, the human voice persists. It whispers into the night that life, no matter how constrained, still seeks its brightness, still demands its meaning, still carries forward. There is a haunting quality to the idea that something so ordinary, so ubiquitous, so invisible in its everydayness, could shift its nature from friend to enemy. Water itself, the ultimate symbol of life, does not need to roar like fire or explode like thunder to be dangerous. For those who live with aquagenic urticaria, water is a silent adversary, a force that waits quietly in corners, bound not by aggression but by inevitability. And because it permeates so much of the world, what should be a source of comfort becomes instead a waiting peril, unpredictable but constant, inescapable yet unavoidable. It is unlike other allergies, unlike conditions that can be managed by cutting out one food or one flower or one type of fiber. With water, there is no abstinence, no permanent escape, nothing that can be removed. It is too omnipresent, too deeply woven into every act we perform, every movement we make, every breath of humid air that surrounds us. This is what makes it a hidden predator, a force that hides in plain sight, not announcing itself with violence, but cloaking itself beneath the fabric of daily life. Consider for a moment the sheer impossibility of avoiding water when you take into account how thoroughly it dominates our environment. Look around any room and you will see it in the condensation of a window, in the sweating surface of a chilled glass, in the dampness resting at the bottom edge of a sink. The sky carries it across continents in clouds, releasing it indiscriminately in rain. Oceans hold vast bodies of it, lakes saturate the landscape, and even the air carries it invisibly, an unseen companion woven into the atmosphere in every corner of the world. There is no place on earth untouched by moisture, no desert so barren, no building so sealed, that water does not linger in some form. For those who live with this allergy, this means vigilance is not an act chosen only for certain circumstances, but a permanent state of existence. The very fact of living requires constant negotiation with an enemy without boundaries. Small domestic moments illustrate this hidden tension. Take for instance the act of boiling pasta when steam rises from the pot in clouds fragrant with the simplicity of food. That steam is water, invisible and intangible at first, but capable of clinging to the skin just enough to spark irritation. Or think of a hot day in which windows are opened to let a gentle breeze pass through. On that breeze can ride humidity strong enough to alter reactions, strong enough to remind the body that water is everywhere, impossible to sequester behind walls. Even in climates that feel dry to the average person, traces of water linger within air, within breath itself, stirring the unending vigilance of anyone whose skin will rise to fight when the level grows too high. The irony of being forced to fear water is profound. It is not only about contact but about the psychological shift of having to mistrust something that is supposed to be nurturing. There is sadness in not approaching the rain with warmth, sadness in recoiling from moments that should be gentle and renewing. The silent enemy takes away not just comfort but connection to a world shaped largely by water's presence. To never run into waves crashing at a beach. To never stand outside during a storm and feel one's hair and face soaked with exhilaration. To never dive beneath the cool of a pool in summer. These absences accumulate like shadows that stretch behind every moment of denial, reminding the person that the world divides them from ordinary joy. It is not only play or leisure that becomes barred, but necessity. Hygiene rituals that others engage in uninterrupted must be meticulously reconsidered. Washing dishes can call forth contact with wet surfaces. Scrubbing hands at a sink may create welts across knuckles and fingers. Even brushing teeth requires careful avoidance, ensuring that water touches only enamel and gums without spilling across lips or cheeks. The enemy infiltrates even these simplest gestures, demanding forethought, forcing the sufferer to choreograph every act of cleanliness in ways invisible to others. This hidden planning itself becomes another source of exhaustion, another anchor dragging behind a life lived differently, filled with caution rather than ease. Sweat compounds the struggle with cruel irony. The body itself, in its natural regulation of temperature, produces water as a byproduct of survival. For those with aquagenic urticaria, what others barely notice as droplets glistening on skin after exertion becomes a form of self-betrayal. The body attacks itself with every bead, every involuntary secretion. Exercise becomes more than strenuous, it becomes dangerous. Emotional states like stress, fear, or excitement can draw moisture to the surface, turning even intense moments of happiness or sorrow into risks. That the enemy is not only external but internal drives the experience into territory uniquely isolating. To mistrust not only the world outside but one's very own body produces a division that is hard to articulate, hard for others to comprehend fully. What emerges across this constant confrontation is not always outward hostility but a quieter erosion of trust and peace. Over time, a person may stop noticing scenery in the same way, may not attend outdoor gatherings unless certainty of safety is guaranteed, may stop partaking in rituals that knit society together. Simple rain-soaked festivals, trips to hot springs, moments of dancing in humid night air, all slide away. And with those absences come feelings of being left apart, placed slightly outside. The silent enemy does not roar loudly, but it isolates, gently but firmly, pulling lives away from communal experience. The pain of flare-ups themselves is intense but temporary, the pain of lifelong distance seeps much deeper. It becomes woven into identity, an ever-present reminder that life must follow different rules for reasons no one else around truly grasps. And yet, this silent enemy does not always triumph over the human spirit. Resistance takes form not only in creams and medications but in inventiveness and planning. Umbrellas become a constant carried not only for storms but even for rumblings of clouds. Weather patterns are studied with unusual care. Certain showers are reimagined entirely, adapted into rituals quick and deliberate, using protective pre-treatments upon the skin. The battle line may be invisible, but responses sprout everywhere, evidence of how human beings bend their environment, their habits, even their inner world to survive in harmony with conditions that strain imagination. While most never glance twice at the humidity rating on the daily forecast, those with this condition read such information as crucial, as essential data for mapping out each hour ahead. Water may be omnipresent, but planning arms one against it, erecting a fortress of caution in the middle of unseen danger. The strange thing about water as a hidden enemy is that it never quite becomes dramatic. Fire destroys with spectacle, heat shatters with force, lightning announces itself in blazes across the sky, but water's danger here is soft, unceremonious. Its attack blooms silently, fleeting across the skin in red welts and spreading irritation. There is something almost cruelly modest about this hidden violence, because it could so easily be dismissed by those unacquainted with its consequences. The lack of outward spectacle contributes to the loneliness of it, as though even the enemy itself is camouflaged, leaving its victims alone not only in battle, but often in explanation. The hives may fade after an hour, leaving no scar, nothing visible to prove the ordeal. To describe the pain without evidence is a secondary wound, making one feel as if the ordeal never happened in the eyes of others. What sleep teaches us, in its long procession of drifting hours, is that hidden enemies are often more terrifying than those in plain sight. The mind can wrestle with what it sees, but to wrestle with the unseen requires deeper endurance. For some sufferers of aquagenic urticaria, the night is one of rare peace, sheltered indoors, away from rainfall and humidity. For others, night is yet another battlefield, as the body sweats subtly during dreams, motion, warmth beneath blankets. In either case, vigilance never collapses entirely. It is the continuous watchfulness that defines life as much as the condition itself. A person can never turn fully away from the knowledge that water is everywhere. Therein lies the paradox, striking sharper than any clinical description. The very substance of life acts as predator, and yet without it, death would be immediate. Water becomes both savior and foe, a necessity that can never be fully embraced, but also never rejected. The body still requires hydration, blood still needs its fluid, cells rely on aqueous balance for function. Internal water nourishes, external water antagonizes. This duality, internal ally, external enemy, creates a split so fundamental that no metaphor, no story, no comparison ever quite captures it. It is perhaps the starkest illustration of what it means to live with paradox written into one's flesh, to wake each day in a marriage with contradiction. The story, thus, does not end with despair alone. The enemy is silent, dangerous, omnipresent, but not completely overwhelming. For those affected, life continues, marked by small victories carved daily against the backdrop of constant danger. The absence of spectacle, the hiddenness of the struggle, makes it all the more remarkable that they continue forward with such strength. While water lurks quietly in every moment, human resilience grows quietly as well, matched against it. They stand as living proof that even when the world itself seems to rebel against comfort, adaptation is possible, endurance achievable, and meaning preservable. So as you let yourself drift deeper into rest, imagine the unseen enemy held at bay not through might or force, but through patience, caution, and quiet strength. Think of how profoundly strange the world must feel when rain carries threat instead of relief, when sweat is not merely inconvenience but harm, when tears sting not only the heart but also the skin. Think of the courage it takes to inhabit such a body, and to continue, steadily, peacefully, despite it all. And in that imagining, you will understand more than science can say, more than medicine can prove. You will understand that the world is complicated and unpredictable, yet survival whispers quietly through it, even against the most silent enemies. Science, when it meets paradox, often pauses in reverence and confusion, circling the mystery like an orbiting planet around an unknown star. With aquagenic urticaria, the paradox is especially arresting. How can water, an element that threads itself into the double helix of existence, into the very plasma of our blood, into the metabolism of every cell, ever be framed as an enemy? The condition forces science into uncomfortable territory, demanding that researchers re-examine fundamentals of skin biology, immune response, and human perception. The quest to understand it has become not just the pursuit of a medical explanation, but an unraveling of how delicately constructed the human body is, how easily foundations we take for granted can be flipped inside out. As the story shifts toward hypotheses and theories, what emerges is at once dazzling and frustrating, a landscape of speculation where fragments of truth shine like stars, scattered but not yet connected into a constellation. One of the earliest directions that physicians explored was the possibility that the reaction is not to water itself but to certain substances dissolved within it. After all, most water encountered in daily life is not pure. Tap water carries chlorine, fluoride, and residues of metals from pipes. Rainwater touches dust and pollutants as it falls from clouds. Even distilled water comes into contact with air, surfaces, or trace minerals. Could it be, some asked, that what appears to be allergy to water is merely an allergy to compounds carried by water? At first, this explanation seemed compelling, but case reports gradually dismantled it. Patients reacted even to distilled water, carefully controlled to remove foreign substances, even in contact isolated on small skin patches. The immune system responded as if the very touch of water itself had become suspicious. With that revelation, science was forced to admit that the condition was stranger than contamination, that it resisted the neat comfort of impurity as the culprit. Another hypothesis that came into prominence was the idea that water interacts not with foreign particles, but with elements naturally present on the skin. Human skin carries sebum and oils, proteins, and lipids that keep it flexible and resistant. It is possible, some propose, that when water meets certain proteins or lipid components, chemical reactions form byproducts that irritate the immune system. Perhaps water functions as the catalyst, not the main villain, initiating a change in natural molecules that then set off alarms within the body. This subtle difference has profound weight, because it suggests that the body is not allergic to water directly but to the fleeting, fragile chemicals that emerge in its presence. The puzzle then deepens, because it raises the question, why only a few people? Why do billions touch water daily without consequence, while only a handful experience this tragic twist? That is where genetic predisposition enters the discussion. Perhaps hidden within the genetic map of certain individuals is a configuration that predisposes their skin to react differently, activating an immune sensitivity foreign to the rest of us. Histamines, of course, are implicated in almost every allergic reaction, and they feature prominently here as well. When water touches sensitive skin, mast cells underneath release histamine, dilating capillaries, drawing immune substances forward, creating redness and swelling. But the initial trigger remains unknown. In typical allergies pollen, peanuts, dust, the immune system misidentifies a harmless foreign particle as enemy, creating antibodies and preparing defense. With aquagenic urticaria, there is no particle, no protein invading. There is only water. Does the body, in this case, misfire in recognition? Does it create phantom warnings in error? Or is there another agent hidden in the complexity of skin that science has yet to identify? This gap between visible reaction and invisible trigger sits at the heart of the enigma, pushing researchers toward deeper territory. Some researchers have turned towards structural anomalies in the protective barrier of skin. The epidermis and stratum corneum, when functioning normally, maintain moisture balance and shield the sensitive layers beneath from unnecessary intrusion. But what if, in certain individuals, those barriers are flawed in invisible ways? Microscopic cracks, altered lipid ratios, protein misfoldings that allow water to seep differently, initiating reactions deeper in the skin. If true, aquagenic urticaria would not be an allergy in the traditional sense but rather a barrier dysfunction, an inability of the outer wall of the body to mediate something as basic as contact with liquid. This would suggest new treatments focus not necessarily on calming the immune system but on strengthening the barrier itself, reinforcing the epidermis to withstand water in the way most skin naturally does. Experiments with protective creams have provided limited support for this theory, reducing symptoms for some patients, though never offering complete reprieve. Additional speculations venture even further. Could small nerve endings within the skin perceive water contact as injury, misfiring signals of pain and triggering immune cascades in turn? In this framing, aquagenic urticaria becomes not only an immune condition but a neurological one, a miswiring of perception at the sensory level. Others argue for the involvement of internal osmotic balances, water shifting gradients when it touches skin, subtly altering concentrations across membranes, tricking cells into behaving as if injury occurred. Each theory opens doors, but few doors lead to conclusions. And so the condition hovers in the fog of partial knowledge, remarkable because of its rareness, yet elusive because rareness itself starves science of evidence. This insufficiency of data frustrates as much as it fascinates. In an age when science maps genomes, designs molecules atom by atom, and decodes the universe in particles smaller than imagination, here we are confounded by a simple fact of life: water touching skin. The strangeness is humbling. In it, we confront our limits, reminded that beneath our certainty flows a world of complexity too deep to chart completely. Aquagenic urticaria is not only a medical mystery but a philosophical one, shaking the confidence of what we consider known and reminding us that knowledge still has vast frontiers glossed over by assumptions. Still, despite its elusiveness, the pursuit of explanation continues, and each hypothesis carries not only academic weight but human consequence. For the patient struggling to cope, knowledge is safety, explanation is relief. Even a partial answer reframes their world, giving them a language to represent their pain to others, validating what otherwise might feel invisible. Science is not merely a search for truth but an extension of empathy, a bridge between those who suffer and those who strive to understand. Each hypothesis, whether proven or discarded, is another stone in that bridge. And beneath the hypotheses lies the emotional gravity of what it means to live at the mercy of incomplete understanding. One can follow medical advice, apply protective barriers, dose antihistamines, avoid triggering situations, but always beneath those actions lies uncertainty. The uncertainty breeds not only vigilance but unease. What if tomorrow it worsens? What if exposure grows more severe? What if the science never provides deeper relief? In this way, the mystery itself becomes part of the illness, an additional phantom weight pressing on shoulders already burdened by constant adaptation. The unknown can sometimes hurt as acutely as the physical reaction, growing into anxiety that drapes over each aspect of life. Yet within this mystery is also a strange form of hope. For if the condition is not fully understood, then it is also not fully hopeless. New studies may arrive, new technology might peer more closely into cellular behavior, revealing cracks we do not yet see. Genetic mapping could identify predispositions that, when corrected, prevent new generations from inheriting the same suffering. Nanotechnology or molecular medicine may one day create synthetic coverings, invisible shields on the skin that render water's touch benign. The blank spaces on the map, frightening as they are also spaces of possibility, spaces where discovery may rise at any time. Consider too the layered beauty of science's questions, the way each hypothesis reflects not only curiosity but respect for complexity. We may not yet know why water can be poison for some, but the journey toward answers has already illuminated new aspects of skin biology, immune regulation, and human adaptation. Even rare conditions like this ripple outward into greater knowledge for all, sharpening the edge of medicine and broadening our vision of what health can mean. Experiments may fail, hypotheses may crumble, but with each attempt, the range of what is possible expands, and through that expansion, hope increases. When you listen in the darkness tonight, the ideas may swirl like a quiet constellation, water interacting with skin proteins, water seeping through barriers, nerves misfiring, histamine spilling, genes whispering differences hidden within DNA. Each idea is partial, incomplete, yet rich in possibility. Each idea draws you closer to the strange elegance of the puzzle, the recognition that life is not as predictable as it seems. And in contemplating that, a strange calm emerges, because mystery itself can be beautiful and intangible reminder that even as we seek explanations, wonder itself remains a kind of answer. And so the scientific exploration of aquagenic urticaria continues not as a straight ladder leading upward, but as a labyrinth, winding, twisting, pausing, sometimes doubling back, sometimes leaping forward. Within its labyrinth are patients, researchers, doctors, and listeners like you, reflecting in quiet rooms about the fragility of the human body, the hidden dangers within the ordinary, the mysteries that still wait in plain sight. As your body drifts further into rest, allow this labyrinth to become a dreamscape of questions, and let those questions weaken your grip on certainty as you embrace the unknown. Because in that embrace lies a kind of truth as deep as any science, a truth that whispers, not everything must be solved now, not everything must lose its mystery. The journey itself carries meaning just as much as the answers we seek. Survival, at its core, is not only about endurance, but about invention. Human beings, when placed against seemingly insurmountable obstacles, find within themselves an extraordinary capacity to rethink the ordinary and to reshape their environment in ways that allow life to continue. For those who live with aquagenic urticaria, survival is not marked by single dramatic victories but by thousands of small, deliberate adjustments woven into the fabric of every day. The condition does not allow for forgetfulness. It demands attention at every turn. And in that constant demand, those who endure must craft strategies, routines, shields, and reimagined rituals to navigate a world saturated with the very element that threatens them most. Every action becomes deliberate, measured like steps across a fragile bridge. Bathing, normally casual and refreshing, becomes a timed, controlled performance. Some sufferers learn to shorten showers dramatically, allowing water-only brief contact with skin before layering protective creams or oils that act as barriers. Others experiment with bath alternatives, using specific cloths dampened minimally, or sanitizing products that can reduce the need for water altogether. Even the warm cascade of water against the shoulders, which others take as relaxation, is carefully rationed, monitored second by second for safety. To walk into the shower is to walk into a battlefield knowing exactly how many moments you can spend before retreat becomes necessary. And retreat does not mean safety immediately, because the skin's rebellious response lingers, rising in itchy welts even long after the water has dried. This ritualized negotiation becomes a defining rhythm of existence. Households themselves transform into sanctuaries designed for control. Humidity meters may be stationed in rooms, guiding decisions about ventilation and air conditioning. In hot months, fans and cooling systems run not solely for comfort but to suppress sweat before it rises. Extra layers of absorbent clothing may be chosen to soak moisture before it gathers too long on the skin. Towels are ever nearby not to dry from swimming or showers, but to intercept any accidental spills, sudden sweats, or the stray traces of condensation from a glass left too long in summer air. Where others see nothing unusual, those with aquagenic urticaria see invisible battlegrounds and position defenses accordingly. A home is not only a dwelling, it becomes an evolving fortress tailored against an omnipresent rival. The outdoors requires another level of vigilance entirely. For most people, weather is mild inconvenience, rain is a matter of umbrellas, sunshine a matter of shade. But for those who suffer with this condition, weather becomes existential. Storm clouds gathering in the distance are read with urgency, forecasts scanned meticulously, raindrops turned into potential threats as severe as any approaching danger. A single unplanned walk in the open air can end in painful consequences. Thus, clothing itself becomes armor, hooded rain jackets, water-resistant fabrics, multiple layers safeguarding against even the faintest mist. Where others may choose clothes for style or comfort, those with aquagenic urticaria must constantly weigh practicality in every selection. To step out under uncertain skies is to dress not just as a precaution but in full preparation, as though encountering unpredictability on a battlefield. Even exercise, that fundamental pillar of health, is transformed into a careful and fraught negotiation. Strenuous movement, whether running, cycling, or vigorous play, risks activating the body's own sweat response, and sweat, as cruel irony dictates, is made of water. The body itself becomes unpredictable territory in need of monitoring. Many adapt by keeping activity moderate, cooling themselves preemptively, exercising indoors where fans or air conditioning can immediately counter perspiration. Some learn to time workouts during the cooler hours of dawn or dusk. Others replace heavy exertion entirely with gentler forms, stretching, walking slowly, calming practices that allow for movement without the same risks. It is not simply that sweat must be avoided, it is that joyfully losing oneself in the abandon of movement must be replaced with controlled intention. Even moments of exhilaration, climbing too many stairs, dancing in laughter, must be measured against the threat of the body producing its own unfriendly sting. This reorganization of life extends even to the domain of emotion. Tears, those intimate expressions of the heart, are weaponized by the body's mistranslation of water's contact. People with aquagenic urticaria may grow skilled at containing emotion, at holding back crying, not because they lack feeling, but because the saltwater of grief or joy leaves welts as real as those from the rain. It is an invisible resilience, a survival mechanism built against both sorrow and elation. Imagine the weight of suppressing the primal urge to cry, knowing that what most experience as catharsis will instead invite the flare of painful reaction. Here we glimpse how survival strategies move beyond practical adaptation into profound emotional architecture, teaching oneself not only to plan routines differently but even to channel or restrain feeling itself. What is remarkable is that these strategies evolve quietly, often unseen by anyone outside. The individual, through trial and error, through daily encounters with water's varied forms, becomes a scientist of their own body, a researcher conducting constant experiments in adaptation. One day perhaps trying topical shielding creams, another day reviewing antihistamine timing, another carefully testing whether brief rainfall under an umbrella can be tolerated. Successes build private knowledge, failures become whispered notes in memory, setting boundaries for the future. The body becomes both adversary and teacher, instructing the mind to reshape life meticulously and continuously. Communities, friends, families, colleagues sometimes struggle to perceive these daily negotiations, because on the surface the condition is invisible once flare-ups recede. Someone may not realize why walks are declined on damp mornings, or why pools become avoided despite invitations. They may not understand why someone carries layers of protective clothing into even mild weather, or why exercise is hesitant when others around them rush forward. This lack of visible evidence is part of the battle, making the crafting of survival strategies not only a matter of biology and environment but also of communication and trust. Strategies extend beyond the body into the social realm, requiring courage to explain, patience to repeat, persistence to advocate for oneself where disbelief might otherwise erode dignity. That too is survival, just in a quieter, deeply human form. Over time, strategies gather into rituals, rituals into culture, and what began as monumental challenge becomes internalized as routine. The person no longer thinks consciously about each towel, jacket, or careful step, it becomes instinct. Survival has its own rhythm, its own choreography, as natural to them as bathing freely or walking in the rain is to others. In this way, adaptation reshapes perception, gently altering the boundary between dangerous and safe until life continues not carefree, but structured, not simple, but possible. This transformation of impossibility into possibility is perhaps the most profound survival strategy of all, the rewriting of reality itself. Within this constant vigilance lies also a form of resilience that few conditions demand so regularly. The resilience is not loud, it is quiet, steady, deliberate. It is in the child who learns to play inside when rain falls instead of outside in puddles, yet still finds joy in toys and imagination. It is in the adult who turns down an invitation to swim but still attends the gathering, wearing their difference silently yet proudly. It is in the partner who explains again and again to others why certain things are avoided, finding voice amid invisibility. Survival strategies, therefore, are not only physical but linguistic, emotional, communal. To live with aquagenic urticaria is to craft a language of adaptation visible in action, invisible in persistence that weaves the person's resilience into daily life. Science may still puzzle over triggers, and medicine may still experiment with treatments, but survival strategies belong uniquely to those who live with the condition. They are improvised scripts, handwritten out of necessity, replayed shift by shift, day by day. Within these scripts are stories of patience, of mistake and correction, of slow accumulation of wisdom carved by pain but ultimately shaped into endurance. When considered in their totality, these strategies reveal not only the fragility of being human but the boundless creativity of it. Because in the absence of cures, in the absence of perfect remedies, what remains is human ingenuity itself, the relentless refusal to surrender even when life insists upon limitation. As you sink deeper into reflection, as words settle in your mind like ripples across a pool, imagine the world through the eyes of someone crafting life in this way. To see the approaching cloud and adjust plans, to step into the shower like entering combat, to check the air with a glance and know whether to linger or retreat. Imagine shoulders that carry not only garments of fabric but garments of vigilance, constantly shielding, constantly aware. These strategies may seem exhausting, yet in truth, they are evidence of strength, subtle, resilient, unyielding strength. And in recognizing that strength, your own body filled with water, safe and unthreatened, feels more deeply connected to its fragile gift of ease. So it is that survival in the shadow of water's paradox is not about elimination, nor is it about conquest. It is about continual adjustment, a flexible dance over and over again against an omnipresent adversary. Those strategies may never receive recognition in grand headlines or medical breakthroughs, but they form the quiet backbone of human persistence. They ensure that life does not collapse beneath the silent enemy, but instead carves out its own patterns of existence shaped differently, yes, but every bit as meaningful, every bit as worthy. And that is the lasting truth of human survival. even when water becomes poison, even when the familiar turns to threat, life continues, steady as a heartbeat, deliberate as a breath, enduring not through grand heroics but through the simple, daily art of adaptation. When survival strategies stretch to their limits, when daily life demands caution at every corner, when the silent enemy seeps into the smallest cracks of existence, medicine inevitably enters the story, not as a cure because no cure yet exists but as a companion, as an attempt to soften the edges of suffering. The medical dimension of aquagenic urticaria is as strange and complex as the condition itself. Doctors, researchers, and patients walk together along an uncertain path, testing treatments borrowed from other allergic conditions, experimenting with therapies that might stabilize the skin, calming the immune system when it overreacts, strengthening barriers when they weaken. In this realm, hope is tentative, fragile, constantly negotiating with disappointment and expectation. Still, the act of probing for relief is in itself a form of resistance, a refusal to let the paradox reign unchecked. The most immediate class of intervention lies in antihistamines. These medications, familiar to millions who cope with seasonal allergies or mild reactions, act by blocking the effects of histamine in the body. Histamine is the chemical messenger that instructs blood vessels to dilate, that coaxes redness and swelling to appear, that instructs the skin to itch and flare. In aquagenic urticaria, the visible welts and hives are driven by just such a cascade. By dulling histamine-S power, antihistamines can reduce the redness, lessen the itch, blunt the anger of the skin-S reaction. Patients often take daily doses not because they anticipate contact but because the risk lurks in every moment, and preemptive treatment provides a margin of safety. Yet antihistamines, while helpful, are rarely complete shields. Reactions may still occur, only softened or delayed, and side effects such as drowsiness or fatigue can cut their own shadows across the rhythm of daily life. The relief is partial, yet partial relief is better than none, and so they remain a foundation, a first line of defense erected on uncertain ground. In the search for greater protection, another therapy has emerged, phototherapy, a treatment that harnesses ultraviolet light to alter the skin's responsiveness. Originally designed for other dermatological conditions such as psoriasis or eczema, phototherapy exposes the skin to controlled doses of UV rays, triggering gradual changes that may desensitize the tissue to irritants or reduce inflammatory responses. In aquagenic urticaria, some patients have reported improvement, as though the skin, once retrained, becomes less reactive to the presence of water. The process can take weeks or months of repeated exposure, guided by doctors who calibrate the radiation carefully to avoid burns. When relief comes, it is not absolute, but it can grant longer moments of calm. The idea that light can modulate the strangeness of water's sting is both poetic and inspiring, one element of nature gently counteracting another. Still, the therapy is not universal, not permanent, and success varies from case to case. Topical solutions fill another category of attempt. Barrier creams, greasy ointments dense with protective agents, can be layered onto the skin before unavoidable exposure. These creams serve as shields, repelling water, keeping droplets from saturating the sensitive surface. Some patients find that with creams applied in advance, they can survive brief contact with rain or sweat with fewer consequences. The effectiveness depends heavily on timing, consistency, and the type of formula. Some products wash away quickly, others irritate in their own way. Yet the symbolism of applying a barrier becomes powerful in itself. The action of preparing skin for daily battle reminds the patient that protection is possible, that agency exists even when cure eludes. Each smoothed layer is not just chemical shield but ritual, an act of intent that empowers even as it acknowledges fragility. Other medical approaches probe deeper into systemic regulation of the immune system. Corticosteroids, potent anti-inflammatory drugs, have occasionally been tried in severe cases, tamping down immune overreaction with broader force. These carry risks of long-term side effects, and their use is cautious, sparing, reserved for moments when symptoms spiral beyond endurance. Immunosuppressants, too, hover at the edges of experimental possibility, drugs that silence the body's overreactive defense system entirely so that it may not rise against water. But silencing the immune system brings vulnerability to infection, fragility in the face of viruses, bacteria, the unseen companions of everyday life. To weaken one danger is to invite another, and so such approaches remain controversial, rarely applied, still largely experimental. The patient weighs suffering against risk, neither side promising safety, only different shades of uncertainty. In recent years, biologic therapies engineered molecules designed to target specific pathways in the immune system have stirred interest. These therapies, successful in conditions like chronic urticaria or severe asthma, offer the possibility of precision where older drugs blunted effect broadly. To block one receptor, to silence one protein cascade, to intervene at the exact point where miscommunication turns into symptom, this is the dream. But the rarity of aquagenic urticaria means that biologics have barely been tested in this context. A handful of case reports, a fragment of evidence here and there, whispers of improvement among some patients. But absence of large trials leaves the therapy floating still in the realm of perhaps. The possibility, though, is thrilling, medicine marrying its sharpest tools to the most enigmatic question, with potential that lingers just beyond reach. Amid these medical options, there is also the understanding that treatment is not only chemical or technological but psychological as well. To live with constant vigilance is exhausting, and stress itself worsens symptoms. Emotional support becomes as critical as pharmacology. Doctors encourage patients to seek therapy, to find coping strategies for anxiety, depression, or social withdrawal that may accompany this rare disorder. Support groups, though small, offer spaces where the invisible is finally seen, where sufferers meet others who nod in recognition instead of disbelief. To be believed, to be understood, to be accompanied, these are not luxuries but integral to health. Medicine recognizes here that the condition is lived not only in skin but in mind, not only in welts but in loneliness, not only in biology but in identity. The wider medical community, however, struggles with the condition's rarity. The small number of patients scattered across the globe means that rigorous research is difficult, funding scarce, trials limited. Doctors often base recommendations more on anecdote than controlled evidence. For the patient sitting in a clinic, this can feel like abandonment, as though their suffering is too rare to warrant scientific priority. Yet there is also resilience in this rarity. Each patient is a pioneer, each doctor who treats them a researcher as well as physician, each consultation both care and contribution to knowledge. Slowly, case by case, the map of aquagenic urticaria expands, narrow, fragmented, but expanding nonetheless. The partnership between patient and doctor thus becomes one of shared exploration. A new medication is tried cautiously, a cream tested, a dosage fine-tuned, a therapy evaluated over weeks. Together they observe, record, reflect, adjusting course like navigators on an unmapped sea. Progress may be incremental, relief partial, but within that companionship lies dignity, the assurance that no one faces the silent enemy alone. Medicine cannot yet deliver absolution, but it can deliver solidarity, and sometimes solidarity is the most essential medicine of all. Yet even as medicine attempts strategies, there is an acknowledgement of limitation. Doctors tell patients honestly, no known cure exists. They speak of trials and possibilities, but rarely certainty. It is in this tone of uncertainty that both sides must learn patience, to balance hope with realism, to find stability in partial victories rather than absolutes. This attitude is difficult to embrace. Disappointment lies so closely beneath hope. Still, those who manage to find peace within uncertainty often carry less stress, adapt more gently to life's boundaries. It is a paradox of its own. Acceptance, though not cure, can sometimes reduce suffering by freeing the mind from constant war with impossibility. At night, when the world is hushed and the mind seeks rest, it is worth reflecting on how medicine itself learns to adapt, much like the patients it serves. Where cure eludes, care persists. Where evidence is scarce, compassion guides. Where therapies falter, experimentation continues. The arc of this struggle is long, bending slowly toward understanding, fueled by the persistence of both sufferers and doctors who refuse to be satisfied with mystery. And though progress may seem slow, history teaches us that conditions once thought permanent eventually yield to discovery, sometimes suddenly, sometimes after centuries of uncertainty. So in the whisper of the night, as sleep draws nearer, one can imagine laboratories where scientists peer into microscopes, dermatologists consult their patients, researchers compare scattered reports, each act driven by the shared goal of illumination. Perhaps in our lifetime, the veil will lift, and water will lose its paradoxical sting for those few who suffer. Perhaps science will find a key where so many doors have felt locked. But until then, medicine moves forward with quiet courage, offering not solutions absolute but gestures of care, barriers against despair, and the reminder that even in affliction, one is not abandoned. And in that reminder lies a different kind of healing, less chemical, less immediate, but deeply human. Medical strategies may soften the skin's revolt, but emotional accompaniment softens the heart's burden. Together, they create a space where life, though strange and restricted, still continues, still carries meaning. The story of medical support for aquagenic urticaria is not just about pills and creams, but about people standing together against the unknown, crafting safety from fragments, dignity from uncertainty, and hope from the stubborn soil of paradox itself. To live with a rare disorder like aquagenic urticaria is to live not only within the physical constraints set by the body, but also within landscapes of emotion and psychology that shift constantly beneath the surface. The welts fade, the hives subside, the stinging itch diminishes over hours, yet the fear and solitude that accompany the condition remain long after physical symptoms disappear. In many ways, these unseen burdens weigh even more heavily, for they shape identity, color relationships, and echo through every decision. Understanding this facet requires us to step beyond medicine and science into the intimate terrain of the heart and mind, where pain is not only felt upon the skin but sustained silently in thoughts, in worries, in the loneliness of being misunderstood. It is here, in the invisible theater of emotions, that the struggle takes on its deepest resonance. Fear sits at the center of this experience, a constant presence both subtle and acute. It is not the singular shock of sudden trauma but a quiet, daily vigilance. Imagine seeing a forecast of rain on your phone and feeling not a mild inconvenience but a surge of dread. Imagine stepping into the bathroom not with anticipation of refreshment but with tightness in the chest, wondering whether today's contact with water will be more tolerable or more brutal. Imagine walking through a crowd, scanning with a heightened awareness for drinks held carelessly in others' hands, for spilled water on floors that could splash onto skin. Such vigilance is exhausting. Fear does not roar but whispers in every moment of routine, turning ordinary actions into calculated risks. To live in such constant readiness is to lose the casual ease that others take for granted, and the erosion of that ease, day by day, compounds into profound weariness. This fear slowly plants seeds of isolation. Rainy days may keep a person indoors not because of desire but because of necessity. Beaches, swimming pools, spas, all social spaces where communities gather around water become forbidden. Invitations pile up to be declined with carefully constructed excuses, until eventually, friends may stop asking altogether, not out of cruelty, but out of misunderstanding or fatigue. To the outside world, these refusals may seem like distance, even aloofness. Inside the sufferer's world, they are shields, erected against exposure and pain. The consequence is a growing separation between the person and the communal fabric. One gradually becomes a witness rather than a participant, looking through the veil of difference at lives lived with freedoms unobtainable. This solitude bites deeply, because human beings, by design, seek belonging. To be distanced from ordinary rituals, a dip in the pool in summer, a walk under light drizzle, the splash of laughter at fountains, is to be pushed to the edges of community life. Within families, too, the impact becomes layered and complex. Parents who attempt to support children with aquagenic urticaria often carry not only the emotional strain of watching suffering but also their own frustration and helplessness. Protective instincts drive them to shield their child from exposure, sometimes at the cost of tension with other siblings or friends. Children must grapple not only with their own pain but with moments of feeling different, excluded, fragile. The natural play that develops identity in youth, mud puddles, water balloons, swims under the sun, is denied, and a child learns early to explain their difference, to answer confused looks, to resist the urge to join. Adults with the condition, whether parents themselves or not, must constantly balance their own protection with the needs of those around them. Entering relationships requires openness, and that openness can feel fraught with the anticipation of disbelief or pity. Love, friendship, kinship, all are possible, but all are made more fragile by the necessity to explain and defend invisible suffering again and again. In the workplace, challenges multiply quietly. Offices decorated with humidifiers, industries requiring physical exertion, jobs exposed to outdoor weather, all are dangerous territory. Colleagues may not understand why someone avoids after-work gatherings at spas or why they appear reluctant at group exercises. Career choices themselves may eventually be narrowed, not by lack of passion or skill, but by environmental risk. The invisible condition dictates visible trajectories, drawing back ambition with the quiet but firm limits that water imposes. In such erosion of choices grows frustration not only at the disorder itself but sometimes at the seeming indifference of the wider world, which cannot see the full scope of what must be endured. Beyond fear and isolation lies another weight, the sorrow of invisibility. The body betrays itself in front of no witnesses, and even when reactions appear, they fade quickly, leaving little proof behind. After days filled with vigilance, a person may feel compelled to justify themselves to others, encountering disbelief or casual dismissal that adds insult to injury. It's just water, others might say, not realizing how deep and real the suffering runs. That disbelief builds walls that are even harder to climb than the practical obstacles of protection and adaptation. To face pain is one thing. To face it while others doubt its legitimacy is another layer entirely. Psychological studies remind us that recognition, simply being seen and acknowledged, is fundamental to human health. Without it, even mild suffering intensifies. In aquagenic urticaria, invisibility becomes its own affliction. Yet woven into this landscape of fear, solitude, and invisibility, there also shines a peculiar resilience, a brilliance born not of choice but of necessity. Those who live with this condition learn strength in ways few others can imagine. They discover reserves of patience, because every daily act requires caution. They cultivate discipline, because survival strategies must be rehearsed with precision. They grow in empathy, because to live with an unseen burden is to sense how many others might also be suffering in silence. Out of struggle emerges not only pain but also wisdom, the wisdom of adaptation, the wisdom of endurance, the wisdom of finding beauty even when denied the pleasures others cherish. This wisdom can manifest in simple yet profound moments. A person may find joy in dry spaces others overlook, creating sanctuaries of safety filled with comfort and intimacy. They may build friendships not around shared activities in water but around conversations, art, music, creativity. They may embrace forms of relaxation that compensate for the loss of physical immersion, from meditation to gentle physical practices that allow expression without sweat. The human spirit, when pressed, does not collapse but bends toward creativity. To substitute, to reimagine, to find joy in other textures of life, that is resilience in action. Psychological support plays a transformative role here. Therapy becomes not just treatment but companionship, giving voice to feelings that otherwise spin silently within. Patients who engage with counseling often report not only reduced anxiety but also renewed clarity of self. To articulate one's struggle is to reclaim it as part of identity rather than a foreign invader. Support groups, though inevitably small given the rarity of the condition, amplify this effect exponentially. Suddenly, one is no longer alone. To hear another say, "I know what it feels like when even tears burn," is to have the world open up from isolation into solidarity. Words shared between sufferers carry immeasurable weight, knitting companionship out of rarity, forming communities however fragile, however dispersed across the world. In digital age, these communities stretch beyond geography, giving individuals insight, strategies, and hope from distant friends they may never meet face to face. And within those virtual rooms exists something more valuable than medicine: belonging without skepticism, compassion without condition. The psychological terrain also includes hope, an emotion no less fragile but no less powerful than fear. Hope is fed by every medical report of improvement, every therapy trial that shows promise, every whisper of relief from another patient across the globe. Hope also feeds internally, from personal victories, days without reaction, rains avoided, routines accomplished smoothly. Hope rises from the knowledge that science is always advancing, that what bewilders today may be remedied tomorrow. And in the human spirit itself, hope is often a natural counterbalance to despair. For even when fear gnaws, when isolation expands, when frustration sharpens, there remains the persistent pulse that something better is possible. Even in conditions that feel immovable, history is filled with once mysterious diseases that yielded eventually, transformed into manageable conditions through persistence of research. The timeline is uncertain, but uncertainty does not extinguish possibility. To reflect on these psychological dimensions is to expand our definition of survival. Survival here is not only protection from water but protection from despair, protection from isolation, protection from self-doubt. It is found in the careful art of containing fear, in the courage to endure disbelief, in the creativity to replace denied experiences with new ones. Each emotional strategy runs alongside physical strategies, entwined so completely that neither exists without the other. The shield against water is incomplete without the shield against loneliness. The umbrella is incomplete without the language that explains why it is necessary. As one listens in calm, perhaps drifting toward sleep, one can sense the magnitude of this unseen struggle more fully. Imagine carrying the vigilance of a soldier in every mundane moment, the weight of advocacy in every social space, the tension of fear in every humid breath. Imagine also, however, the strength it builds, the muscles of resilience flex daily, the courage to continue forward in a world laced with risk. And imagine the beauty still found, laughter within shelter, bonds forged in honesty, hope rising despite limitation. The condition is cruel, yes, but the human capacity to endure it is extraordinary. In this lies an essential truth: our suffering and our resilience are inseparable. Where one appears, the other grows, as though shadows summon light. Aquagenic urticaria may strip away certain freedoms, but in its place, it exposes raw humanity, vulnerability and strength existing side by side, fear and hope mingling as constant companions. It is here, in facing the psychological realities, that the condition reveals its deepest lesson: fragility does not erase meaning. On the contrary, fragility may enrich it, reminding each of us that life, even constrained, remains worth shaping with care, patience, and love. And so, as your eyes close and your thoughts soften, let the weight of fear and isolation speak not only of pain but of resilience. Let the whispers of hope settle gently against the silence of night. Somewhere in the world, someone lies awake, vigilant still against the threat of water, but also dreaming of cures, of belonging, of safety. And in that dream is a message for us all, that even when life bends under rare and cruel paradox, the human heart bends further still, not breaking, but holding, waiting, persisting, until the unknown yields to light. The story of aquagenic urticaria does not end with present suffering, nor even with the coping strategies already described. Like all medical mysteries, it opens forward into a vast horizon of unanswered questions, a horizon where science seeks to stretch its reach, where hope lingers in the shadows waiting for illumination, where possibility is held not as fact but as potential. The future of this condition lies in the restless curiosity of human inquiry, in the laboratories where molecules are manipulated beneath microscopes, in research centers where skin biopsies are studied under glowing lights, and in the patient's quiet persistence that lends energy to every doctor's search. Though today's sufferers move carefully through rain and moisture, tomorrow may hold new relief, new understanding, even cures, emerging gradually through the relentless unfolding of science. When we imagine the future of research, we first turn to genetics, because in so many rare conditions, the roots of difference are inscribed in the code of DNA. Already, the human genome has revealed how single mutations can alter lives, how silent variations in proteins can ripple outward into complex disease. For aquagenic urticaria, no specific gene has yet been identified, but researchers suggest that certain variations may predispose the skin's membrane structures or immune regulators to behave differently when water touches them. Advances in whole genome sequencing now allow scientists to study families where the condition is present, seeking out the faint whispers of mutation scattered across chromosomes. The hope is that one day, a gene or cluster of genes may be identified that holds the switch which transforms water from neutral into antagonist. If so, therapies could one day target such genetic differences, correcting the anomaly at its root rather than merely treating symptoms on the surface. Alongside genetics, the frontier of immunology expands the field of possibility. For many researchers, aquagenic urticaria seems less like a direct allergy and more like a miscommunication within the immune system. The body reacts as though attacked when no invader is present. Unraveling the molecular path of this miscommunication is akin to untangling a complex telephone line filled with static. Yet immunology has leapt forward in recent decades, discovering specific pathways of how mast cells release histamine, how receptors open and shut like gates across cell surfaces. Already, biologic drugs exist that block these gates with precision, reducing reactions in patients with chronic hives or asthma. Could similar biologics be designed, tested, refined for aquagenic urticaria? Perhaps, with enough data, these cutting-edge therapies could transform lives, silencing the body's false alarms without silencing its real defenses. Technology, too, lends its hand to this horizon. Imagine wearable sensors capable of detecting early changes in the skin at the microscopic level, alerting the wearer to reactions even before visible welts form. Imagine creams enhanced with nanotechnology, layering invisible hydrophobic films so fine that water cannot penetrate, yet so light the skin still breathes. Imagine artificial intelligence analyzing scattered case reports from across the world, finding patterns hidden to the human eye, revealing commonalities that suggest new hypotheses. Already, digital platforms allow patients to share diaries, track their reactions, feed collective data into research studies. With enough participation, even rare conditions can gather momentum, building toward insight where before there was only fragmentation. The future is also built from precedent. Consider how other rare conditions, once dismissed as bizarre anomalies, have eventually yielded to remarkable interventions. Genetic therapies once dreamed of as science fiction now treat forms of blindness and immune deficiencies. Immunotherapy now trains the body's defenses to attack cancers once unstoppable. Dermatology itself has witnessed revolutions. Diseases previously untouchable, such as psoriasis, now receive biologics that reduce suffering dramatically. Aquagenic urticaria, though rare, is not exempt from this larger arc of scientific progress. Its mystery does not guarantee hopelessness, it invites creativity, persistence, and the possibility that what bewilders today may one day be manageable tomorrow. What gives this vision its pulse is the resilience of patients themselves. Every person who consults a doctor, who endures trial treatment, who logs their experience meticulously, contributes to science's progress. Each small observation welts forming after 3 minutes instead of 5, reactions intensifying or subsiding depending on temperature, the difference between distilled water and chlorinated water becomes valuable data. In aggregate, these fragments become a body of knowledge. This living partnership between patients and researchers is not only practical but profoundly hopeful. It means that progress depends not solely on laboratories but on the lived reality of individuals whose determination channels suffering into inspiration for discovery. Still, the future also raises philosophical questions. If one day aquagenic urticaria becomes fully understood, if a genetic switch is uncovered or a biologic cure invented, what would it teach us not just about this one rare condition but about the human body more broadly? Perhaps it would highlight the delicate fragility of our barrier functions, showing that what we believe to be steady and universal is in fact contingent and vulnerable. Perhaps it would illuminate how the immune system, that miraculous sentry of health, balances constantly along the edge of overreaction and underreaction, dancing between safety and misfire. Perhaps it would remind us, more than anything else, that human beings are not separate from their environment but intricately interwoven, that water itself cannot be considered neutral. It interacts with our biology in ways subtle, complex, sometimes mysterious. As the future unfolds, there will likely be milestones to celebrate along the way. One day, a study may emerge documenting the first effective biologic compound to produce remission in multiple cases. Another day, a dermatologist may announce a breakthrough cream that shields skin with unprecedented effectiveness. Later still, gene therapies may correct predispositions even before symptoms begin. Each step will not only change the lives of those affected but expand the realm of medicine itself, opening corridors of knowledge applicable to other conditions as well. Every rare disease understood brings light to dozens of others, for the mechanisms of biology intertwine across conditions, revealing universal truths through the study of exceptional cases. For the patients who live today in vigilance, such promise matters immensely. It allows them to imagine futures where showers are not girded with caution, where sweat from joyful exertion does not sting, where tears can fall freely as expressions of love or grief without consequence. To imagine ordinary experiences regained after years of denial is to experience hope at its rawest, most tangible level. Science thus does more than explain, it dreams alongside those who await its answers. Even when certainty is far away, the act of imagining possibility defends against despair. The patience required is immense. Research proceeds slowly, funding lags behind, and complexity resists reduction. Yet history affirms that patience is not passive. Patients advocating for awareness, researchers persisting in publication, families searching and supporting all combine into a momentum that, though invisible at first, grows stronger each year. Aquagenic urticaria may remain rare, but awareness spreads, and with awareness comes attention, and with attention, eventually, discovery. Perhaps the most beautiful aspect of contemplating the future is not only the arrival of medical solutions but the transformation of social perception. If understanding deepens, if the condition becomes widely recognized, then disbelief will diminish, invisibility will erase, and those who once felt isolated at the margins will feel embraced in acknowledgement. Future progress is not only biological but communal, a society learning to value and validate those whose struggles are hidden. Scientific discovery therefore brings with it emotional healing, not only freedom from pain but freedom from skepticism. As you listen in the dim hush of night, consider how this forward-looking horizon is itself a form of comfort. That science does not pause, that curiosity does not dim, that hope for answers continues in every laboratory, every clinic, every patient's diary. Imagine the researchers late at night, peering into slides, adjusting equipment, logging yet another observation. Imagine a parent writing a letter to a medical journal describing their child's strange reaction, unaware that years later, such a letter will count among the vital data points leading to collective knowledge. Imagine all of these scattered efforts weaving together like strands of thread, slowly forming a tapestry that will one day depict the full image. The horizon remains far, but it is there, shimmering faintly with possibility, insisting that even the most perplexing mysteries will not hold forever. Rare though this condition is, stubborn though its secret has proven, it will in time yield to the relentless patience of science. Until that day, hope itself is a medicine. Hope is nourished by imagination, by trust, by solidarity, and by the ever-present reminder that mystery itself is temporary. What feels inexplicable today is not beyond tomorrow's understanding. So as you fall deeper into calm, let these visions of possibility carry you. Imagine a future where no one fears the rain, where children play freely in puddles without risk, where sweat glistens after joyful exertion without pain, where tears fall as pure language of the heart. Imagine the collective sigh of relief that will rise from those once guarded, once isolated, once misunderstood, as at last they step into water unafraid. That sigh is already forming in imagination, waiting for science to catch up. And when that day arrives, it will be more than triumph over a condition, it will be proof again of the human capacity to question, to struggle, to search, and eventually, to illuminate. The future of aquagenic urticaria is unwritten, but it is not without direction. It bends toward discovery, toward comprehension, toward liberation. Each question posed today lays stones on that path. And those who walk it patient striving each morning, doctors supporting in clinics, scientists laboring in silence carry with them the power to transform paradox into resolution. The unknown is vast, but hope is vaster still. As the journey of this strange and haunting condition draws to a close, this journey that has carried us through paradox, through science, through survival strategies and the emotional landscapes of those who endure, we arrive finally at a place of reflection. In reflecting, we do not simply recount the strangeness of aquagenic urticaria, nor only the medical trials, nor only the descriptions of human resilience. We arrive here, at this final moment, as travelers who have walked together through a story where water, the lifeblood of the planet, has revealed itself simultaneously as nourishment and poison, friend and foe, comfort and suffering. It is here that we must pause, allowing the weight of all we have encountered to settle inside us, like still water in a quiet basin under moonlight. There is always something remarkable about endings, for they echo not just conclusions, but transformation. In listening to this story, perhaps your mind has turned inward, imagining what it would mean to live in a body reshaped by such a paradox. Perhaps you have felt a quiet pulse of empathy rising, a new tenderness for those who endure what you may never directly experience. Perhaps you have even felt gratitude, a gentle realization of how fragile and miraculous your own ease with water, your own freedom to step into rain or bathe without suffering, truly is. This is the deeper gift of reflection, not only awareness of another's pain, but deeper awareness of your own life's blessings. And yet, to close with gratitude alone would be incomplete, for gratitude must sit beside compassion. Every person who endures aquagenic urticaria is not only a puzzle to science but a life, a voice, a story. To think of them only in clinical terms is to forget their laughter, their sadness, their courage in facing each day. They remind us that rarity does not diminish humanity, that conditions affecting only a few should matter no less than those shared by millions. In their steadfast resilience we see a reflection of the broader human truth, that survival is not only about strength or conquest, but about persistence, patience, and the ability to find meaning even within the strangest constraints of existence. In a way, their lives become a metaphor we can all hold on to. They live with water as adversary, and yet they continue. We, too, each carry adversaries into our lives, challenges, invisible struggles, hardships internal or external. The lesson that emerges here is that even facing what feels impossible, human beings discover adaptations. They create strategies, they lean on community, they seek explanations, and when explanations remain elusive, they build resilience instead. This is the human story told again and again throughout history, life pushing against constraint, carving meaning from paradox. Aquagenic urticaria is rare, yes, but its essence speaks universally. It is a reminder that life is fragile, but that fragility does not suppress beauty. On the contrary, fragility amplifies beauty by reminding us how precious each moment truly is. Think back across the journey we have taken together in this narration. At the beginning, we encountered the paradox: water, sustainer of life, transformed into torment. We explored the medical roots, the mysterious reactions of skin and immune system. We stepped into the daily lives of those affected, witnessing their careful choreography of survival, the armor of umbrellas and jackets, the rituals of brief showers and creams, the emotional restraint of holding back tears. We listened to the medical attempts: antihistamines, phototherapy, barrier creams, experimental therapies, none perfect, yet each evidence of determination. Then we traveled into the unseen psychological terrain, the fear, the loneliness, the longing for belonging, but also the persistence of hope, the ability to find solidarity across distances. We cast our gaze forward into the horizon of research, imagining the promise of genetics, immunology, nanotechnology, and community-driven science. And now, we arrive at reflection, at message, at humanity. The rhythm of all human storytelling moves this way, from problem to journey to resolution. Even when the resolution is not cure, not definitive closure, it becomes nonetheless a resolution when meaning is revealed. And the meaning is this: that even in struggles unimaginable to most, life continues. That courage is not loud or spectacular, but quiet and daily. That hope persists even under the silent pressure of paradox. And that every patient, every researcher, every listener, becomes part of a greater chain of compassion that enlarges the circle of what is possible. There is profound peace in recognizing that mystery does not diminish us. Mystery itself ushers in reverence. We know more each year, science advances, therapies improve, hope strengthens, but even before the cure arrives, the act of bearing witness carries weight. By listening to this story, by letting it sink into your resting mind, you have joined in that act. You have carried those voices forward in your thoughts, even if only for an evening. That is not nothing. That is already healing in its own way. Shared awareness softens the isolation of rarity. And now, let yourself drift further still into the calm of this ending. Picture a globe spinning silently in its path around the sun, a planet covered in oceans, rivers, clouds, mist, all of it water. Picture billions of people moving beneath those skies, most never aware that water could ever be adversary. And then picture the few, rare and resilient, who step carefully through that same world, aware of dangers hidden where others see none. Imagine their strength, their patience, their persistence. Imagine their hope that slowly, steadily, science will bring relief. Imagine how much courage it takes each day to rise, to face, to protect. That courage hums now through the quiet as you rest, a reminder that strength is not absence of fragility but the ability to carry fragility with grace. So here we close, not with despair but with reflection, not with final answers but with a widening sense of compassion. May you carry forward an awareness of those whose struggles you may not see. May you feel gratitude for your own ease, and compassion for those who endure a lack of it. And may you rest tonight with a deeper softness, a deeper connection, to the unseen stories that surround us all. Thank you, dear listener, for joining me through this journey into the mystery of aquagenic urticaria, for lending your attention, your imagination, and your empathy. Thank you for allowing this story to take root within you, even as you drift into rest. May your dreams tonight be gentle, like streams that nourish without harm, like rain that falls without fear, like water restored to its ancient role as comfort. Good night, my friends. Sleep well, and may peace surround you until the morning comes.